just realizing like, oh, we're doing this thing together, and we're in this together, and like we're excited to figure it out together.
That was really refreshing to be in a situation where I didn't feel like I had to pretend like I had all the answers.
There was a sense of like childlike play. Did we all just become best friends?
Hey friends, welcome to another Dreams of Education podcast with me, Kelly Tankley, and my friend and co-host,
Michelle Baldwin.
Yay! So last time, Michelle, we touched very briefly on some of these rituals that we started even in year one that I think are worth mentioning because we continued to do them all the way through. And I kind of love them for any school. They could be kind of implemented no matter what kind of school you're in or anywhere that you're at. So I thought we might start with the beginning of the year. And we had talked last time about the way that we got to know students and how that evolved over time from me being the one who asked all the questions to creating a card game that you all could play with kids. And then you got to have that experience of getting to know them firsthand. But a lot of what we did really centered around that identity piece and getting to know who are the actual learners in our care. And I think that was the most brilliant thing that we did and continued to do was start with the actual learners and value that in a way that certainly I had never seen in my past school experiences. I might have had glimmers of them in my actual schooling, but nothing that was like school-wide, intentional, that type of thing. We also talked last time about how cool it was that we had these we were surrounded by just the most amazing personal learning networks ourselves, right, and how much that was influencing who we are and how we were thinking. And one of the things that we implemented, what came directly from some friends of ours, some other educators who were so good about sharing the things that they were doing. And we would be like, that's brilliant. And we could kind of implement right away. So one of those things being Identity Day. So I don't know if you want to talk about kind of how we discovered Identity Day and then how it looked and how it kind of evolved.
Sure. I mean, we have to back up just a little bit to talk about the learner profiles because, as you said, that the card game and the questions that we would ask kids and the stories that came out of them answering questions. The questions themselves were not really as important as, oh yeah, this one time my friend and I did this at home and we decided to build a Rube Goldberg machine and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And all of those really fun things that the kids came through, that's where we really started to get a glimpse into who they were. And we could carry on those conversations throughout the year. And then we started to do Identity Day. Our friend George Kouros was in Edmonton at the time. So this was, I think, around 2010. He'd shared that he was asking their staff and their students to do Identity Day and just have kids bring in things that were important to them. There was no theme other than just show us who you are. And a lot of other schools picked up on that. I know George said that he didn't originally think of that. It was from some other place. And maybe Josh Stumpenhorst? I don't know. I need to go back and check that out. But all of these schools were starting to really think about how can we do this in our building as well. And we glommed onto that idea. And wow, our kids really just kind of knocked it out of the park. And
it was so cool, even year one.
Just bringing in things that they felt were important to them. So, the kids who felt like they were sporty would bring in like a soccer ball or medals or team pictures. Mm-hmm. And they would talk a little bit about how they got interested in being a soccer player, for example. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of dancers or a lot of actors and just
we had the one kiddo who had just been diagnosed with diabetes. And so he actually was able to talk about that journey in that first identity day. I remember him kind of sharing with the community, like, why do I buzz out of class every day to, check my blood levels, and what does that mean? And he was, figuring it out himself. And so to be able to share with the community, like, here's who I am, like, it was just so cool, the variety that we saw.
Well, and I think because a lot of kids who have any kind of a health issue often feel otherized, it was great for him to come in and share, this is why I do it. This is what you might be seeing. It's not scary. And then it became just, oh yeah, that's where he's going right now. And I feel like when kids choose to share that information, and of course they don't have to, but when they choose to, they are empowered to say, here's how I feel. This is what's going on with me right now. And then they get support from the other classmates as well. And how great is that?
It's so awesome. And I think it's important to say, we didn't put any parameters at all around what they could or couldn't bring. We did have kids who would say, like, I got this pocket knife from, whatever, and it's really special to me, and can I bring and tell the story? Or we had a snake one year, a couple snakes one year. And so just to really open that up to kids where they didn't have adult parameters saying what was or wasn't okay, it was truly a reflection of what's important to you. It's like the best show and tell.
Right. Well, and it lasted pretty much like for some years it was half a day, and we all would get to go around to every class, and the teachers and staff members did them also. So the kids got to know us a little bit, what was important to us. The student who brought a snake, I love snakes, and even asked to hold it. And he was like, you like snakes? And it was just another way to connect with kids. That kid was not in my class. And from then on, he and I had a connection just from that one day that, I mean, we didn't talk about snakes forever, but
right.
But it was another way that he was like, okay, she's interested in the fact that I have this. And it brought on other conversations later on too.
And it just shows that there's something, people who didn't know that they had something in common suddenly knew they had something in common. That was true of the kids too. So let's talk kind of like what the setup looked like for somebody who's never heard of Identity Day or don't know kind of what that structure looks like. Describe for us what an Identity Day looked like. We set a time aside, a specific amount of time. It was usually about a half a day or a couple hours at least. But yeah, talk about what it actually looked like.
I think we initially were afraid that because we had said to the kids, think of like a science fair presentation, but it's about you. And I think initially we were afraid that they would all come in with trifolds. And we were
banned trifolds.
We did. Because we're like, you can be more creative than that. So for some kids, they would make a poster or they would use an iPad and make a video. Others would just bring in items and they would kind of just very specifically put them around on their little space. Eventually, we started to get kind of thematic with it, right? I remember one year I told my students, you're all superheroes or you're all action figures. And they built life-size boxes as if they were an action figure you could purchase at a store. And I said, I just want you to decorate your box with everything that's important to you and what kind of features you would have if you were the action figure. And they got super creative with that because I think, again, we talked about this in previous episodes. Kids love to be creative, but sometimes when you say, go for it, they're just kind of like, I don't know what to do. So some constraints were helpful. And by providing that theme, they all could kind of get on board and say, okay, oh, now I know what I'm going to do with this.
I was remembering too that the first year that we did it, as soon as the parents heard it's a presentation and the kids, there was some panic because they're so used to it's got to be polished. It's got to look like, $1 million. It's got to be this certain, we all get this idea in our head of what that meant. And we, especially that first year, we were trying really hard to free from some of those assumptions of what things had to look like. And so I literally think we told them, you may not do a trifold. Like if you bring a trifold that your parent made for you and you went out last night and bought, fancy lettering or something, like this is not what we're about. because we wanted it to be a true reflection too of the individual kids and not a polished something that looked like it was Pinterest worthy. Like that wasn't the goal early on. It was really like bring something that reflects who you are, and I don't care what it is.
We wanted it to change from a performance type presentation to this. I'm just going to tell you who I am, and I think that was really hard, especially that first year, because some of the kids did bring index cards in that were, written down of what they wanted to say. And I was like, well, just tell me about this item that you have at your table. Oh,
yeah.
And then they kind of like turned into themselves rather than I'm a student reading from this. And I think that was a really hard switch over the years until our kids just kind of got used to it. This is just how we do business. But those first couple of years, it was hard because they did. And again, like you said, parents were kind of expecting this one kid at a time. Like, no, it's going to be all the kids doing this.
Everybody's doing the same thing at the same time. We always invited, even that first year, we invited parents in because we thought it would be a great way for them to get to know the community of kids as well. All the kids go home talking about their friends and talking about so-and-so. And so for the parents to actually go through and meet all of the other kids in the community, to hear something about them, to have that connection, I think was really neat just from purely a community building standpoint. And then two, all the kids getting to hear, you'd have a little and a big connect because a big brought their Lego collection and they're like, what, you play Legos? It was like this thing they may not have known about each other in school, and especially, not being in the same class, being vastly different ages. And now we know we have this connection. So you saw those relationships just start to build from a very, very early on because they were saying, oh, you're a whole person outside of just who I know you as at school.
Right. We even at some point realized we needed to help parents and other adults who were coming. Sometimes they would bring friends or grandparents or aunties and uncles. We kind of gave them some questions to start. It was like question stems. Because they weren't always sure of which questions to ask the kids as they went to each station. So sometimes we would have big posters on the door to say, ask me about blah, blah, blah. Just to help them start those conversations. And then as I walked around, a lot of times I was video recording our students. I would listen to the parents talk, and every once in a while I'd slide in and say, oh, I wonder about this. Could you tell me about this? And then I'd step back. And it was every year that we did that, we learned something new that like, okay, here's how we need to help the students. Here's how we need to help the families. But I really loved how much the kids experienced the freedom of being who they are. One of our students, I do remember, wrote down that on one of her boxes that she was weird.
Yes, I was thinking of that one. Yep.
And our kids are like, even some of our staff are like, oh, you're not weird. And she knows, no, I am. It's a good thing. I love being weird.
It's a good thing. I know. And I'll never forget, because that staff member was like, Miss Tinkley, you need to come over here because it's a sweet thing, thinks she's weird. And how are we helping? And I was like, go talk to her. She's like thrilled that she's made this discovery and feeling like she can embrace this about herself. And so it was like, to me, it was such a beautiful moment, but you're right. Like if, as the adult, we can sometimes look at those things and like, oh, how do we protect? And it's like, no, that's not, that's where the engagement comes in. And I think Identity Day was so important for us as a community. One, it just helped to get us, like I said, to get to know each other. But secondarily, we were showing kids from the get-go, we value your voice. We care about who you are. We care about who you are outside of the classroom, outside of a grade, outside of normally what, schools or teachers might demonstrate that they care about. And so we were able to show with our time and our attention and our intention how much we valued who they were and that they belonged in our community.
And it was important for us to do this at the beginning of the school year. Yeah. So I think the first few years, it was within the first week or two.
It was like the first Friday of the first full week of school.
Right. And that we realized maybe that's too soon.
Yeah. I think part of that was the way that Identity Day evolved for us.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the early days, we really were doing it just as some of these other schools that we were inspired by were kind of doing it as, that kind of science fair, just show up and bring who you are, bring something that's important to you. Over time, it evolved where we were, our first inquiry block is who we are. And so we were doing this whole deep dive into who we are, developing our voice, feeling more comfortable, gelling as a class, following Detox Week, like following some of these other pieces. And then to have Identity Day be the culmination of that block,
Right.
I think was brilliant of us. But you're right, it took several years before we kind of got to the point where it was like, oh, it doesn't have to be after the first full week. Like we could give it a little bit more time. We could give it 6 weeks and then do this. And the experience just got richer and richer and richer, I think, every single year we did it.
Absolutely. And I think watching the older kids think more about metaphor and identity. And again, sometimes we had themes in there, and just watching them get super creative with that. And then also explaining the metaphor as it related to themselves personally. It was that sometimes you would just walk in and you talk to somebody that you barely knew and they would just blow your mind. And I was just there like, I'm so proud of you. That is amazing. I would never have thought of that when I was 12 years old, right?
Yeah.
But they got to experience that success in just telling their own story so early in the school year. And I think helping them to set up to be successful in that way really said, okay, this is how school is going to be at Anastasis. And this is why we value who you are. And it's a lot easier, I think, to take risks in learning when you know from the get-go that you're going to be valued for who you are at this school.
Well, it's again rooted in belonging, right? Like if we don't belong to each other as a community, the vulnerability that learning takes, especially inquiry-based learning,
right,
I don't think we would have been successful in anything else we had done if we had not started from such a rich, deep place of connection with kids and valuing voice.
Right.
And so how lucky were we that we just happened to know folks doing really interesting things that spurred our thinking and really became such a driving force in what we were doing. We knew we valued relationship, but like to do it in that way as an entire school, I think was such a happy accident of knowing the right people. And we were intentional about it, but I think, we also were surrounded by people in our community of education that were also thinking in ways that pushed us and encouraged us and spurred our thinking on.
Right. I totally agree. And I think what you said before about relationship, everything that we talk about is always going to come back down to relationship, and how knowing who a student is on a deep enough level to help them grow as a learner always comes back to relationship. Curriculum, that's not as important. Standards, even though we know how important learning standards are, they're still nowhere near as important as understanding who that child is. And you cannot do that without relationship and learning at all.
Yeah. And it was, again, going back to how cool it was that not only did all the teachers get to know every single kid in the community, that was easier to do because of our size as a micro school, but also for the parents and the grandparents, and for year after year for them to come in and see kids so lit up about, we've got 5-year-olds talking about who they are and what they love and what they care about. This year, or last year rather, one of our youngest class had just done part of their Who We Are inquiry block was this deep dive into body systems and learning about their bodies and who they were. And so we were brainstorming about ways that they could show what they had just learned in the first block, but also talk about their identity and bring that piece in for Identity Day. And they ended up making their own operation boards with their faces and their, and so then all the pieces of the board metaphorically represented something. We literally made it where you went in with tweezers and grabbed it out. And when you put the thing in, it lit up. One of our alums came back and helped them, with the circuitry of that, which was so cool. But what I loved about it is as the kids, brought in participants and we would put things in their different body part systems and it would light up and they would talk about, well, I made this, my heart represents this because I really love XYZ. And they got to share so many different parts of them through that, but also, talk about this learning that they had just done about body systems. And so I love that it evolved that way where we can kind of tie in, like you were saying, the superhero was so cool. You'd push a button and they'd start talking about, the different features that they had. And
they would not talk if you didn't push that button.
They would not talk. They had so very explicit instructions on their box, push to talk. But it just, and the kids loved it, right? Because they are now not only able to talk about themselves, but they're entering into this sense of play,
right? And
exploration and creativity, and they all looked so vastly different in the best ways. It couldn't have turned out cooler how it evolved, but that was really out of us getting to know ourselves better, getting to know what parameters worked best, getting to know timing wise when that worked best to show up. And it's one of my favorite days every single year.
Mine too.
And I think the parents too, what a great way to start off the school year of them getting to know and getting to see their own kid shine. We always have parents who were telling us how incredible it was to, they see their child all the time, but to see them interacting with other adults and, speaking and looking people in the eye and sharing enthusiastically, even at 5, is just really neat.
Well, and I think too, in traditional models, I feel like for kids a lot early in the school year, they don't feel like they can be who they are. They're very much trying to figure out how to fit into that system. And knowing that we are working towards here, we want you to be who you are. We value and honor who you are. That makes such a difference. And it gives them the sense of confidence pretty early on in the school year. As I said earlier, just I can be who I am throughout the year and I'm honored for that. And I'm respected for that.
I don't have to try to be somebody else. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to wear a mask.
Right.
I literally one year, I'm just remembering this, for Identity Day, we did the mask. Do you remember that? And on the front of the mask was the things that they are known for externally. And then on the back of the mask is things that people may not know about them. And the kids got so vulnerable with, I'm thinking specifically of some of the junior high students and the things that they wrote and how vulnerable they were with the community about sharing these things that they didn't have to share, right? It was theirs. They wrote whatever they want. They got to design it however they want. But to just empower them in that way, that you can be vulnerable in this community and we're going to meet you there and we're going to take care of, we're going to take care of what you share with us.
Right.
I think it's so cool.
Yeah. And it also kind of gave us a heads up to for things to look for, or just to check in. Hey, I'm also an anxious person.
Yeah.
I'm going to check in with you throughout the year if that's okay with you. Oh yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. And just knowing that about them helps so much.
1,000%. I think of the number of kids who shared their anxiety in those moments or as part of an Identity Day project, that then, they heard a lot of Me Too's from our staff of that is something I also struggle with. If you ever need help, I'm your girl,
Right.
And the number of kids that took us up on that when they were in a place where they were struggling in any way and would show up and knew that they had an advocate.
Right.
They really got to know who the advocates were. And all teachers are advocates, but we don't always know in what ways they're advocates for us without an experience like that.
And sometimes we do, as teachers, get kind of blinders on, and I need to get through this particular block, and we've got these activities that we need, and we've got a trip coming up tomorrow. And you do forget sometimes to be human. And sometimes you forget that the kids are human and they're having human experiences, and not everybody's going to fit on your schedule.
Yes.
I'm very much a planner, and I like when things go according to my plan. And that is one of the things that over the years I really learned, even though I still, to this day, still have a little bit of frustration and stress when my plans don't go the way that they're supposed to. But when I take a step back, and that was something that Identity Day helped with as well, to know I need to take that step back and yes, we have a schedule, but today's not that day. There might be something that came up unexpectedly for the whole class or for a child, and how to just knowing how to approach kids when they're in a place where the learning's not going to happen the way that we think it's going to happen today. And so how do we pivot and make things so we can still have a good day, and we can send them home and they're not in tears and they're not, like this the whole time. How important that was just to have the, like you said before, the vulnerability, not only in them, but in ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely did that for all of us, I think, and reminded us that we're all humans. Like you said, having a human experience together every single day. And sometimes that's messy, and making room and space for all of that to be allowed to happen at school, I think, is not something I experienced when I was at school. That was the part I hid away, right? So neat for the kids to, and not saying it was always perfect every day, right? But they knew they had permission, and they knew they had people who would listen to them, who would value their voice. Like I said, we did that from the get-go. And so that was something they knew intuitively, despite whatever else was going on, that we would value what they had to say.
Well, just giving kids the options too. Like there were certain kids that could come up to me and say, I'm having a really hard time right now. I need a break. And knowing that they could say that to me, that I would trust them and be able to give them that space and say, do you need a break? Like, you just need to go run to the restroom and come back, or do you need to go down and have a conversation with somebody in the office? And they could be honest and not worried about, oh, I'm going to be in trouble with my teacher if I ask for this. And I think too, just how many adults really could learn from that. That how much space that they could give themselves if they had permission from the people around them, and even from themselves, just to be vulnerable enough to say, I need a break right now. There's nothing productive happening, and I need a reset. And how many of our kids were able to do that?
I was so grateful. It could make me choke up. I was so grateful for our staff every single year, because we showed up that way with each other as well. That I never felt like I couldn't say, this is really hard, to everybody. And knowing you wouldn't be there in judgment, but you would, everyone would show up for each other in different ways. Or I just need a minute, and I'm like, great, I'm going to be there, and like tag me in. But it was really nice, even from the staff standpoint, to know each other that well, and to know that we had permission to show up as full humans from that standpoint.
That was really an environment that you helped, like you created that for us, because I knew that when I was teaching the littles, I could walk down to the office and say, I need to speak to an adult right now, because it's all just
I need grown up.
I need a grown up conversation for a second. Or I think you gave us, I still have the card somewhere in my car where it says, I'm having a human moment. I need a human, I need some human time. But that environment is not everywhere. And I've had places before where I felt like I couldn't go in and say, hey, this is a really rough week for me because of this. I was just, soldier through. And that's not a healthy place for anybody, regardless of where you work, but especially in a school where you are. I do remember a parent once telling me, you can't have a bad day because my child is depending on you to have every day be a good day. And it stuck with me. At first, it felt like, oh gosh, he's right. And then I really thought more about it. And I'm sure I blogged about it at one point and said, I have to show them the days when, you know what, I didn't have a great morning. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm going to pull it back in so I can have the rest of the day be a good day. I can show them how an adult responds in a healthy way to something not going the way that I wanted it to, or a bad event or whatever. And that was more important than pretending.
I think that is really important to say, because we do such a disservice to kids by pretending that adults have it all figured out.
Mm-hmm.
I remember wondering so many days running a school, when am I going to feel like a grown-up that knows how this all works? And I started talking about that in metanoias in our morning community meeting with the kids, where I would come and say, I was really anxious this morning and here's what was going on. And sometimes there isn't even a reason for it.
Right.
And the number of kids who would raise their hands and go, that happens to me sometimes, and yeah, that it's because we're human. That is what's happening. But to be able to show up as full humans and then, like you said, respond, right? And we're not talking about, you don't dump all of what's going on in your life onto kids. There's lines, right? There's professionalism, and there's things that are just too big for them. Right. But being able to say, like, it was a really hard, it's been a really hard week because my dog died, or it's been, and being able to name those things and have the kids realize, oh, I'm not the only one. It's not strange that I feel this way. Mm-hmm. It's not unusual. And here's what you do when you're in a hard spot or when you're having a hard day. And literally telling kids, yeah, we're going to do feet up the wall in our community meeting and just be silent because I need a reset, right? And to be able to say, like, sometimes when I need a reset, I've learned that feet up the wall really helps me. So if you want to join me, let's do that. If you just want to find a quiet spot to sit. But I think teaching kids and showing them how to truly engage all of life is so important. And it's not something we grew up with. We grew up with the adults have it all figured out. Something's wrong with you if you've not figured this out.
You've had a bad day, suck it up, right? And that mentality never helped me ever. All it did was help me to push things down until it just erupted, and that wasn't healthy. Yeah. And I wasn't the kid you would ever see have a full-on tantrum in school. So it somewhere happened, or maybe that's why I have stomach issues now, because
you shut it down.
I shut it down too much. I think the way that we started our day and how you all scheduled, we started community, the whole school. We go for that mile walk, get them outside, get the oxygen flowing. Conversations are casual and the kids are selecting.
Regulating.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Then we go back into the classroom and you have morning meeting there. Some years I'd start off with a journal and then morning meeting, or I'd do morning meeting and then journal. And how important it was just for the kids to get in and have not only that as a routine, but if something that they wanted to talk about with their classmates and their teacher, if I didn't let them do that until recess or lunch or heaven forbid the end of the day, that's all they could think of. And so having that in place also to share part of who they were, something that they just were excited to share or upset to share, right? Yeah. Any of those things can be, especially in younger children, but I shouldn't say that. For anybody, if there's something that you just want to share with someone else and you don't get that opportunity all day for the school day, your brain is constantly on that one thing. So I know implementing our morning meetings and the option to do a free write. Sometimes it was a theme and other times it was, write what you want, how that really helped set the tone for their school day. And giving them this time when they knew what to expect, but also here I get to share something that's really important to me or I really need your help with, was that starting the school day off like that was such a blessing for kids because they were able to be themselves again. And in a way, they could slowly allow themselves to be more vulnerable. And watching that happen over a school year, there are some kids that it took, almost a whole school year for that to actually happen where they felt safe to share things. Yeah. Others were like oversharers and had it out.
And as we were sharing with the kids, you would start to see them open up, which gave permission for everybody else to feel okay about it. Right. It was like this domino effect where one kiddo would share, and then suddenly it was like, oh, again, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one thinking like this, or I'm not the only one struggling with this, or, you know, excited about what's happening today, but also a little nervous that I don't know what it's going to look like, you know, those kind of things.
That can go wrong in a very short amount of time too.
It can.
There's one I'm remembering specifically where I had kids. I said, you know, sometimes we have these things that really bother us and we're worrying about it. And I was very careful never to act like a counselor or try to do any counseling, because that's not only unethical, but that's, in my opinion, an educational malpractice. But so if there's something that's really bothering you, I just want you to write it down, and we're just going to throw it in the middle, and we're not going to look at it. And they all started crying, and they're like, "Can we talk about it?" I'm like, "Okay."
And then it was carpool.
Someone's, you know, grandma passed away, and then somebody's dog had passed away 5 years earlier, and they were still dealing with it. That
they never knew.
Right. All of these things that are like, oh my goodness, what did I do? And then it was time for carpool. I thought, okay, we need to find a way to allow them to have that. And again, you know, maybe they all needed to cry that day. I don't know. But sending them all home crying, like bawling, sobbing. And I feel like the one person who started bawling then became the next
a
person.
One-upmanship
It
type
did.
thing.
And that was definitely a mistake on my part. But also,
we all learned along the way.
We did.
Yeah.
I think the parents were a little afraid, but the kids came back to school the next day actually really happy that we did that. It was a very confusing thing for me.
I think it was cathartic to be able to, though the methodology by which it happened, the one-upmanship by which it happened might not have been ideal.
No.
I do think there's something to, it's the same reason you feel close to people after camp, right? Because you've just shared this experience. You've cried around the campfire together, and now we're exchanging, you know, addresses to be pen pals the rest of our life.
Right.
Like, I do think there's something to that, seeing raw emotion in each other that probably allowed them to connect in a different way the next day than, you know, if they had just moved on. I don't know.
I didn't do that exercise or that activity again.
You did not. Yes. The timing, I think it would have been okay if the timing was slightly different in the day.
Right.
Because sending them all out sobbing to carpool was a little rough.
And the fact that I could talk about it 13, 14 years later, obviously it was a little traumatic for me.
For everybody. Yeah. Yep. It was early on in the school year, if I recall.
Yeah.
Yeah. We hadn't built all the trust with parents yet.
No.
So another one of those things that we did, even year one, that I love that we stumbled on was Crave and Spark. And those came about because we were not a big enough school to have traditional specials or electives where we had PE and art and music and all the things. But we also wanted to honor that kids had interests that might not show up naturally in inquiry. We didn't know if they would show up in inquiry. And we also wanted to expose them so that they had, even if, you know, movement wasn't their thing, they were exposed to times where they were moving and learning, you know, a sport or learning basic ball skills or, you know, even just gross motor skills, that kind of thing. And so we were not big enough to really do that and have separate teachers come in. One, the budget wouldn't allow for it, but two, 54 kids is not big enough to really do that. And so what we ended up doing was, as educators, we all chose something that we craved learning about. It could be something that we knew well and we wanted to share with kids, or it could be something that we were just interested in and wanted to learn along with the kids. And so every, I think, block, am I right? Every 5 weeks we'd change it, or did we end up stretching it longer than that?
It depended on the year.
Okay.
Some years we went longer.
The first year we might have just done block and then realized that might have been too short for some things. But so you chose, do you remember what you chose the first year?
The first year I did Rock Band, and because the kids had iPads and they had GarageBand on their iPad, And it was a very, very early version of GarageBand, but they were able to start. And I was a music teacher anyway, so I was able to help
You must
them.
have done that as the spark class, like to spark the interest of somebody who may not know they like music.
Our first year, we didn't do both. We only had, I think we only called it Crave.
I thought we did both.
We didn't do Spark.
I thought we did.
We didn't do Spark until the second year. So Crave was just one thing that and I know like, well, this is
that
something
we wanted to share.
Yeah. I knew I could teach that. And the kids I showed them how to create, different tracks and how to compose a song using Apple loops, or that they could record a few things. And again, back then GarageBand didn't do a whole lot like it does now, but the kids were making some really cool, and they're like, do you want to hear my song? And it was like, I'm going to do like 10 songs today. They got so excited about the different things that they were able to do.
Did you do crochet that year?
That was the second year. Yeah.
Okay. And French. Did you do French that year? Different parts of the year?
I did French as an after school thing.
Okay. So I was remembering, so every 5 weeks we would essentially give kids, here are all the choices, and the teacher's teaching it.
Right.
So Mrs. Baldwin is doing rock band. I think Nancy did junk sculptures as one of hers. Morgan did dissection. They dissected frogs. Lance did geography. Is that right?
Probably.
Something, or history related. And then I was doing coding. Matthew did something, but I can't remember what it was. It was a smattering of options. But we would change those options. The cool thing was the kids would give us their first, second, and third choices, and then we would put them in that class. And I think they took 2. So we tried to make their top 2 choices be their 2 that they went to.
I feel like there was a basketball one, and
that's probably I think you're right. Bike riding, and we have bikes dropped off.
All these different years of
I know. And so what was cool about it, though, is we got to, I did coding, so I was learning alongside the kids. I didn't know how to code at the time. I'm learning still. This is an ongoing process. But it could be from kindergarten all the way to 8th grade taking the class together, because it was just something we were interested in. So that was a really interesting to have a kindergartner and an 8th grader together in a coding class, where you're trying to learn something together. And I don't think we continued that every single year, but I loved that first couple years that we were doing it, kindergarten through 8th, that it could be mixed. Seeing how the kids learned from each other and interacted with each other and helped each other in ways that I'm not sure would have happened if we had structured it any other way.
Right. There are a lot of times when a big would help a little, but watching the littles help the bigs. And I know what we talked about when we were doing stop motion animation the first year, and that was one of the youngest kids went and taught all the older kids. And that was just in their regular class. But in Spark and Crave, the different years that we had those, a lot of times the kids would naturally just kind of settle in and help each other. And as you know, like as the adult in the room, I might show, like the year that I did crochet, I had a couple of little ones, their fingers were not able to do, they didn't have the fine motor skills for that. So we incorporated some weaving in that as along with the crocheting. Yeah. And then they were like, well, I wonder what we could make if we had so-and-so do a little weaving, and then we crocheted around the weaving. So they were creating these really interesting projects together that I didn't design. It was something that they brought up.
Well, I love too that it allowed for the teachers to connect with the kids in an area of their own passion, and the kids to be like, that's my passion too, or I'm also interested in that. And so it created another kind of like amazing community piece that I don't know would have happened if we had had the resources to have a PE teacher and an art teacher, and it really let us connect creatively in a way with kids that I don't know would have happened any other. I don't know if we would have gotten there a different way.
Well, and then once we did change to a more of a specials type schedule, how we often had a rotation that would either be Genius Hour or
Yep.
garden or something where it was more like Spark or Crave. So we
Yep.
still had that feature in there, even when the kids were getting PE and music and art and
Yeah.
whatever else.
Yeah. It was still all of us teaching it though,
Right.
which was the neat thing. So even when we did go to a more traditional, they go to the certain specials with their class, they were still able to see a part of us they may not have seen
Right.
any other time. But I remember one of the years of Crave, I taught a class we were upcycling.
Mm-hmm.
And so we took a field trip to like a Goodwill Arc kind of a store, and everybody had $5 to purchase whatever they wanted. And we were going to upcycle whatever it was. And the kids came up with the coolest creations. It was so fun. And it was, again, all different ages. They were helping each other. It was just such a lovely way to connect our community.
Well, and also watching the kids who had some extra skill that they didn't know that they already had.
Yes.
And kind of discovering, oh, I'm really good at this. And then how that translated into, later years when we were doing plays and musical productions.
Set design, costumes. Yeah.
They were doing all of that. And you had kids who were like, oh, we just need to do this hem this way. And I'm like, I know nothing about sewing and you are the expert.
Yeah. And what a neat way for, again, community to be built through a constraint that we had. I mean, it was truly only because we had this constraint of human resource, and we didn't necessarily have, we didn't have a fully done out art room in our first building. We were sharing all these spaces. It wasn't like we had the ability to even, separate so that you could do a full music class in those early years. Later on, we had more of that flexibility that we could adapt and make different decisions. But I love the beginnings of that. And I love the way that we came together as a staff and just created something. And well, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll scrap it and do something different. And yeah, we adapted it every year. It shifted every year. But I think even those early days of us doing Crave and Spark translated into what we did the rest of the years, even though it looked different towards the end than it did.
I think that the kids, when you have a teacher and you see that person in that very specific role, that is how you kind of pigeonhole who that person is. And so having the kids also be able to see, like you said, see us in different levels of things that we liked and that we had skills of, oh, you're not just my classroom teacher. You also know this, or you also, maybe you don't know it, but you're very passionate about this. And helping kids to understand that we don't always have to just do one specific thing, that we can be, maybe I'm a master at this, but I'm a novice over here in this area and I want to learn more. And that's great to have different and varied interests. And I think for them to see us as multidimensional, that really helped them to think, well, okay, here's who I think I am, as this is my identity, but I can also be interested in something that doesn't look anything like what I'm doing right now. Maybe I love soccer, but I also really, really love to act. And that you don't have to just be one thing.
Yes. I think they learned that so well the first year, where that's a brilliant way to say it. They didn't just have to be one dimensional. They didn't have to just have one interest. It wasn't just the theater kid or the jock. Both of those could be true. Right. And in my school experience, that was often not true. Right. Like you picked your lane and that was it. So I do think that they realized, like, I can have all the interests, and it can even be what would have been termed a nerdy interest, and it all fits. It has space to exist, which was just neat. And two, they were getting to interact with other teachers in the community that, they started building relationship with the junior high teacher in kindergarten.
Right. And how important was it then to them to know I have more than one person who cares about me at the school?
And who knows me well. Yeah. So loved that we did that. And then the other ritual I was thinking about that we started even year one was Storyline. And we were really looking for like an identity day type bookend to the year. And we were like, well, we should let the kids tell their story of how of learning throughout the year and how it evolved and where they ended up, and be able to celebrate that as a whole community, the learning that just happened this year.
Right.
And so, again, just one of those things that we did that I think turned out to be such a brilliant move in holding space for that every single year. And sadly, the very first year, I didn't get to attend the Storyline because we had a news organization show up, and that's a whole drama of its own. But I got to see the pictures and hear the stories afterwards enough that it was like, well, clearly this is just who we are now. This is what we do.
Right.
But the intention behind that was we would give them space to, one, go back through their own learning and look at how has my writing evolved? What did I learn in math? What am I really proud of? What project did I do that, was the most meaningful for me? And then give them a place to present that and share that with the community. Again, we brought in parents, all the teachers, all the kids saw each other's learning for the year. They all, for the bigs to go and listen to the presentations, that, again, science fair style that the littles were doing, so honoring of the learning that just happened all year. And I think it was brilliant. But talk a little bit about what you saw with Storyline.
The first year, again, because it was not something that a lot of the kids were used to, we just kind of learned as we went through every school year, right? But just to say, let's start with your writing, because for a lot of them, that's where they were able to see their progress most easily, right?
Yes.
Oh, wow. When I first started writing, I could only do a couple of sentences and I didn't really get my point across. And now I had one student who he hated writing, absolutely hated it. It was painful for him.
Yes.
And then by the end of the school year, he was calling himself a blogmeister because he loved to blog.
Yeah.
And if I told them, we're going to do this writing activity and you're going to put it in your blog, that was a completely different mindset. Oh yeah. This is no longer just I'm writing for my teacher, right? Now, I'm writing so other people can see and hear what I think. And it was just so lovely to really experience that with them. But that's for Storyline, that was where I usually would start. Go pick out something that you can see your progress. Let's give some examples of some projects or some of your work that you're really proud of. Share some of the books that you loved reading this year, and how, when we put it all together, what is the most important thing that you're seeing and how you want to share it. A lot of times I would say, okay, what did you used to think and what do you know now? How do you see yourself on this journey? Some years they created maps. And they'd show themselves. And it was, and they make little like clay figures along the way. The years that we had different themes and metaphor, the kids would really get into that, and share so much through their thinking. Well, when I first started, reading, I wasn't super thrilled that we would read a class novel together. And then I loved this novel and it showed me more about who I am. Just the things that they would come up with. Every grade level that we're looking at, every class, you go in and you're like, wow, these are really deep kids. And I'm like, no, I think all kids are deep. We just don't always give them the opportunity.
We don't give them the space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our kids would really just kind of knock it out of the park when it came to, let's think creatively about how we can share our learning. What was like one year, I think my littles were doing space and they just could not, they couldn't leave space alone. Right. So they wanted to show different planets and the International Space Station and how they're learning and how we rocketed into space and just all of the fun little metaphors that 5 and 6 year old brains come up with. But it was a great end cap to the school year to show these culminating projects of here's where I was when I started, here's my work throughout, and here's where I am right now. And I'm still learning.
And I think it was brilliant in the way that it showed kids every part of the journey mattered,
Right.
not just the end result,
Right.
but every step along the way mattered, and how I showed up every step of the way mattered. And now that I can look back, I remember the first year kids from your class and Nancy's class, like giggling. They'd come print something out for storyline, and then they'd giggle. It happened to be right next to my desk in the hallway. And they would talk, Miss Tankley, at the beginning of the year, look at how I spelled this, and
Right.
they just thought it was so precious that they, couldn't do something, and then that they saw the incremental progression. And I think the kids that got to do storyline year after year, that became just so part of our DNA,
Right.
that it doesn't have to be perfect in every moment. Every moment is getting us closer to where we want to be. And that they would show the process and
Right.
not just the end results. And that parents could see the process and not just the end result, I think was also huge.
I think when you have portfolio style learning compared to chapter, end unit test, move on to something different, right?
Really big project. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you've got portfolio learning, you're able to see that progression, and the kids are able to see that progression. When it's this unit and exams at the end, and then you move on to something new, you don't always see where all you're seeing is maybe a grade at the end of each test. Well, depending on what you're studying and how that results, you might not see, because it might be this up and down in a way that you're like, well, math is a good example. I really knew how to do order of operations, but when I got to fractions, I really stink. And then I moved on to, 2-digit multiplication. They're not related enough in a way that you're seeing a growth in mathematics as you are as where your deficits are in mathematics, right?
Yep.
And I feel like with the portfolio, the kids are like, here's where I can show you that when I didn't understand this at all. And then as we kept working through, oh yeah, I totally get that. And it showed up to me, like one of my students one year, we'd been learning about degrees and angles, and she was studying something about owls. And she learned that an owl could rotate its head a certain degrees. And then she's like, oh, I totally get this now. And so in her portfolio learning and in her storyline, she was able to make those two things connected. Where how do you show that just in a test in math and a test
or in a grade that goes home at the end?
Yeah.
I think the way that we honored the learning, and that kids could see how much we were celebrating any amount of growth.
Right.
And it wasn't all the same growth, right? They were all sharing different pieces that they were really proud of, or, I think we got to the point where they would share, highs and the lows. Like, what was the, I'm thinking of the year that Rachel did Super Mario Brothers, and it was the COVID year. And so all the kids made their Super Mario character and their Mario Kart, and decorated it. And then all the mushrooms were the places they grew. And then the bombs were the things that were really hard or that threw them off track. And for them to just talk about their learning and the year in those metaphors, and to really be reflective in that way, so intentionally, they're still having fun. They're still playing. They're still all those pieces. And I don't think we did it the first year, but I think it was brilliant in subsequent years. We were like, oh, we should talk about their character growth, how they grew as a friend, how they grew, what they saw, not just academically in their year, but also the evolution that they saw in who they're becoming as a whole human. And I think that was so neat, the way they would explore that in the later years. I think we started that fairly early on, but it definitely wasn't the first year.
Yeah, there was one year I'm thinking of specifically where we had just done a pattern fair. And after we finished, I said, okay, you showed me everything that you'd learned about specific patterns, and each kid had chosen a different type of pattern. One was like, I think the moon phases do this, and one was patterns in baking, and one was patterns in music. But
dubstep,
of course, and we can talk about that forever. But after we finished the pattern fair, we came back together and I said, okay, let's talk about all the things that we learned about ourselves that had nothing to do with the pattern thing we were studying. And so they were looking basically at, what typically would be called soft skills. Some of them said, I do a really good job when I'm like early on, but if I don't give myself deadlines, I'm going to miss them. One student said, I am horrible at time management. I wait till the last minute to do everything. So they were kind of learning about those things about themselves. Each of their reflections were very different. And I said, okay, so if there's something in here that you see that you did well, how are you going to continue to do that as part of your process? If there's something in here that you see that needs improvement, what kind of things do you need from the adult who's helping you, or from yourself? If you know that you are somebody big on procrastination, what kind of things, what systems do you need to put in place to help you meet the deadlines in a way that doesn't stress you out at the last minute? And just that revelation for some of them was like, oh, I've never thought about that before. And these kids were 10, 11, 12 years old. So they'd already been through school for a number of years, and no one had really helped them other than saying, well, you just wait to the last minute. Your grade is bad.
You procrastinated. Now you have a bad grade.
And what we know about humans is that procrastination is not laziness. It is an actual brain thing. And some people are way more prone. I'm one of them.
Me too.
Right? It's not like you do it purposefully. I'm not a lazy person. That's not it. So
and we're both planners.
Exactly.
But
sometimes it happens, right? So helping the kid. I remember that child even saying, I know this about myself. And I said, that is half the battle right there. If you know it, you at least can identify when you're kind of falling into that, and you can make the choice. Do I want to stress out all the way at the end? Am I more productive when I do things last minute? Because some people actually are. Or does this cause me more anxiety? And what can I do? How can I ask for help? And he was like, I didn't know I could ask for help.
Yeah.
Like, that's huge.
I mean, even those revelations are so huge. And so many of them came out at Storyline, and again, to bring the parents in and celebrate not just the end results,
right?
The end project, the end whatever, but to honor all of the steps along the way, and that parents would go to kids who were not their own and honor their learning journey by sitting and listening to them. Like, good grief. If we did nothing else right, Identity Day and Storyline were it. And that was everything.
I really feel that any school can do that. I know that we had
absolutely
a lot of things that again, because we're small and we had a community who could attend these things during the school day. I get all of that. We have a lot of privilege in a way that other places don't. However, I really do feel that you can start an Identity Day in your school if you haven't already done that. I really feel you can show progress in a way that helps the kids feel like their learning doesn't just happen at school, and it doesn't end when the semester's over or the school year is over. You can help kids see that learning is a journey that doesn't ever end, but you can honor the milestones along the way. And when you frame it in that manner, it changes what learning looks like and how kids perceive what learning is. It's not just I have to open a textbook and do the odds of 1 through 50 at the end of this chapter. That's practice. That's not learning. So what is it that helps me be a learner? What do I know about myself as a learner? All of those things came about through Identity Day and through Storyline for our kids.
Yeah.
So they know who they are, and they know how to, like we've said in the previous episodes, we can self-advocate, and we know how to describe ourselves as learners. And those kind of things going into high school or university are important things to know about yourself.
And the kids, when they did go on to high school, would come back and say, everybody's freaked out because we got to do this presentation. And they were so adept at doing presentations because it wasn't you're alone on a stage doing a thing. That's not really how we did any of these.
Right.
But they were used to talking about their learning. They were used to talking to a lot of different ages, a lot of different people, and feeling good about that process. It wasn't scary. It was very low stakes. It was truly a celebration. We made it like a party every year. And so, yeah, it makes sense that when they went on to high school and there was a presentation, it wasn't this like panic moment. It was like, oh, I know how to do that.
Right.
You know, it was
even if they
I actually prefer it.
Even if they didn't like to do it, because for
Mhm.
some people that's still, high anxiety, right?
Sure.
It's one of the number one most anxious things for people is public speaking. My husband and I were just talking about this. He and I are the same. I would much rather get up in front of 1,000 people and speak and present than for 5 to 10 people that I know really well.
Same.
Because the smaller group is more intimate.
Yeah.
And the larger group, I don't know any of you, and I'm just going to do my best.
It feels more vulnerable
Right.
to have the more intimate, for
And
sure.
I think
it was interesting too, because the kids really, and I'm thinking pretty broadly, this is true, would have no problem sharing with teachers.
Mm-hmm.
They would have no problem sharing with peers. They would even have no problem sharing with other people's parents. As soon as their parent was in front of them, it was like,
It was harder.
I didn't I don't know how to be, my worlds are colliding. I don't know how to do this. Right. Cause it was like, this is an uncomfortable for some of the kids. I would say if they were going to have a problem, that's where it would show up, is when their parent was there. And I really think it was about like worlds colliding. I don't know how to do all this. I don't know.
I think too that it reminds us that, as a parent, I can say that who my kids were at home is different than who they were at school, is different from who they were at softball or dance
with
or whatever.
Friends,
right. And how we all have these personas of who we expect of ourselves in different places, and helping,
or how we think people perceive us in different places. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we're not being authentic. It just means that you are different in different environment, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And helping a parent to see that, because they only have the experience of who their kids are when they're with them, and that's going to look very different than they are at school in many cases, if not all of them.
I mean, we had a lot of parents who would pull one of us over and say, can you just go and let me watch from over here? Because they knew this about their
Mm-hmm.
child, that it was going to feel like too much pressure for them, or they were going to be sillier, or they were going to, shut down because mom already knows this about me and I'm not repeating it again, or some, things like that. So those dynamics were always interesting to see as well. Just how the different audience in front of them might change, how engaged they are, how lit up they are, which was, it was interesting to see all of it. And love storyline. I will say, for those who are thinking that they may implement it, if we were going to see a dysregulated child, it was going to be on one of those days.
For sure.
It's just so much, like we said, we did it very science fair style, so everybody's kind of going at the same time. There was a lot of stimulus, from, things to look at, to sounds, to people asking questions. So we learned over time, those kids that we knew were going to be dysregulated, and how to give them breaks or times that they didn't have to be on, or just go to a quiet space in the building where nothing was happening, so that they could regroup. But yeah, if you've got a kid that is going to, they're going to love it, even though they loved it, and look forward to it. If they were going to be dysregulated, those were the days. It's
also a lot of pressure in, even if the teachers and the administration is not putting pressure on the kids, this is your end of the year project. Even if it's very low stakes or feels low stakes, the kids who are people pleasers, perfectionists, high achievers, that is a lot of pressure to have to perform and to do well. And I know, especially when there's a project in there and you're like, come on, hurry up, you got to get this done by such and such a date.
Yeah.
That even with the best intention, you're adding to that level of anxiety for kids. And I know for the ones who especially feel that in their bones, helping them, just going up and saying, how can I help you to finish your project? How can I help you prepare for your project? What is the thing that's making you worry the most? What is something that you need? Do you want me to stand here while you're presenting to your family or to the class? All of those kind of things. And again, that goes back to, you have to know your students well enough to know that this is going to be an issue for this one and not for that one. Here's this child over here. I can just let them fly and they're super happy to do it on their own. This one over here needs a lot of TLC. That one over there, don't pressure them. They'll get it done, but tread lightly. And if you don't know the kids well enough to be able to predict that, then storyline can be very anxiety
It would be a
inducing.
nightmare. Yeah, it would be a nightmare if we didn't know them well.
Right.
For all of those reasons. I'm thinking about the way that storyline evolved over the years. The first year, we literally thought about it as a portfolio. In subsequent years, we thought about it. We talked a lot about the learning journey and the journey we were on. And so you'd see kids like, I'm remembering one year, I think it was in Deb's class, one of the kids made her footprints, like outlined her footprints and literally made it like a journey through the classroom. And each part had her work kind of on the floor. We had a year where one of the girls in the junior high, she was new to Anastasis, and so she had started her year, literally her identity day project was inside of a box, and her storyline project was breaking free of the box. And so all of the pieces that she was proud of her growth over the course of the year showed up outside of the box, like exploding outside of the box. And where she started was all inside the box, which I thought was so clever. But it kind of started with fairly humble beginnings. And then it kind of morphed into these bigger themes, I was trying to remember the years where it was really a switch. And I think it's when I came up with those. I love card games. If nobody knows this about me, I love anytime I can get anybody to play cards with me, I'm in. And so it was right around the time probably that Cards Against Humanity had come out, and, we were playing that or versions of that. And I was like, oh, it would be so fun to do something similar where you're coming up with random associations that shouldn't fit a learning activity. And we're going to mash it up with a learning activity. And so I literally have cards that just have random words on them, like food truck or pickleball or superhero or fight club. So they have all these different words on them. And as a staff, we would play this game where we would pick something that we were learning or something that we were doing. My intention originally was just to get us out of the kind of ruts of thinking about how something has to look. It was meant to just like help us be playful, and how we were approaching things. It ended up being like one of the ways that really unlocked us and led us to all these fun moments of creative constraints for our classes and these themes that really let them talk in metaphors so amazingly well about their learning.
Well, and having kids think through the metaphor, that's a pretty high level thinking skill, but to be able to talk it out.
Yeah.
And the kid version of that card game, by the way, is apples to apples.
Yes.
And so playing that game with the kids first was one of the ways that I was helping. Like, I think when I was teaching one of the younger classes, helping them to think through what it might look like if we have a topic out there and you have to look in your hands and make a connection from any of the cards in your hand to that topic. And that was a great way to really help them think through metaphor too. So, or just a kind of out there connection, but they were able to make a connection. I'm like, wow, you took a long ways to get there, but you did it.
Absolutely.
So when we were able to do that, I'm thinking it was probably like the third or fourth year, maybe.
When
I
think that's right around the time when I came up with those that card deck.
When we really started to think through how can we do this in so it's not just the story of me or my learning journey. What else could it have looked like, and
what
how
other
we do
metaphors
that?
could we use? Yeah. So thinking through some examples, I'm remembering when Rachel did the food truck, was so cool. She had pulled the food truck metaphor, and we all riff on these cards as a staff and kind of give each other ideas, and it's really fun. I think it's fun. Hopefully other people think it's fun. I think it's fun. But she and her kids made literal like cardboard cutouts of these food trucks, and the kids decorated the food truck. They got to pick everything on it, and then they had a menu of what they had learned in areas they had grown about. And so when you came to their food truck, they had their paper chef's hats on, and you're supposed to order from the food truck, and then they would deliver through the cutout window the piece of learning that was associated with that menu item and talk about their learning. So it gave them this like playful way to talk about who they were and what they were doing. Can you think of some of your favorite storylines with the kids that you taught?
Oh gosh. I really did like the planets when the kids built their own little scale models of the solar system, and then just jumping around from planet to planet. And they wanted to talk about, different things that they had associated with the planet. Oh, this one's a gas planet, so I can't talk about things that we did on Earth. And it was just like interesting to hear their little brains go that direction. I feel like a lot of the one that I was the most excited for was the one we didn't get to have. That was in 2020 because we ended doing 2020 online, so it was virtual.
Yes, I forgot that we didn't.
Yeah.
I might have blocked that out.
I think we blocked out a lot of
on
those
purpose.
things.
I think I blocked it out on purpose. What was that one going to be? Remind us.
So that I actually didn't plan it because the kids had all of these great ideas. That was such a creative class, and they were
it was a very creative class.
They were finishing up the school year with gardening for sharing the planet and different ways that plants grow. And so they had all of these thoughts about plants and how you start as a seed and how that seed sprouts into different things. So they had these wonderful ideas. And so I'm just jotting them all down, saving them that was from like early March, and then saving them for the end of the school year. And then, we're going to finish the year online. So
Surprise.
That didn't happen.
Didn't happen. We still did a version of storyline, but it was not.
No,
it was not the same. It doesn't translate the same online. I'm remembering Emily did her kids did the fishing one year, and they literally had tubs of water and made their own fishing poles brilliantly out of all different materials. And each fish that you caught represented something else from their year that they were proud of. The oldest kids always had some really unique, like interesting ways that they showed things. Do you remember the one that was like a camera? It looked like a cardboard camera.
It was like the camera obscura.
Yes.
The pinhole camera.
You look through it, and every level of the camera told a part of her story when you looked through this pinhole.
Yeah.
And she had illuminated it was the most brilliant thing. One year, some of the kids did like this, one of the girls did the optometry, and the way the lenses drop down when you're getting your eyes checked, and each lens helps you see a little clearer. And so each part of her story of what she was sharing was another lens to make her end of the year clearer. It just completely brilliant, these kids.
Kevin's class had the layers that one year, just the different layers, and they've been learning about how layers translate into all of these different areas. Like it could be sediment, it could be layers of an individual, all of these different kinds of metaphors. And when I first heard, one of the girls was telling me, I have to make this layer. And I thought she meant like LAIR. And I was like, what are you guys learning? Because I hadn't been in the classroom at that point. I was like, tell me more about this. And then she was using her hands to show how things were stacking. I was like, layers.
Oh, layers. Got it. Yeah, we had done this last year. We had just finished a inquiry unit on space, and so the kids created their own like blow up planetarium that you could walk in. They each had their own constellation, and then they talked about the constellation they created for themselves to represent the end of the year. We had the cooties. The game cooties. One of the classes had been studying ants and different and the ways that they make everything in the world work. And we learned so much about ants, and it now freaks me out to kill them because they feel pain apparently. But we learned a lot. And so the kids came up with this cootie metaphor where each part of the cootie, the parents could they had a cootie catcher, and they could choose different parts and then attach it to the cootie. The kids would tell the story that was associated. What did the kids you ended up with?
They built cities that
They built the cities
that were like things that were important to them. And we'd spent some time learning about different governments, and they were talking in Sharing the Planet inquiry block. They were learning a lot about the environment and what was important to them to protect, and how, going back to that government block, how we organize ourselves, what kind of laws need to be in place to help protect the things that you care about. So I was like, okay, if you had your own city, what things in your life do you value? And how can you show that of all the work that you've done this whole school year, where can you show that in your city? And they did some amazing cities.
It took them a long time, but they turned out so cool.
Yeah, we spent about almost a month getting that ready.
Yeah. And they stall out every year. There's parts where they'll stall out and where they struggle. And it's just, you learn to recognize the signs and anticipate them after a little while. That when they're stalling out, it's not going to be a forever state of mind, that they'll rally and they'll pull it off. Every year they do.
Right.
But it's so fun. I was remembering how much in the first year in April, our first year of Anastasis in April, Kane's Arcade, the video Kane's Arcade came out. And I remember watching it with the kids, and just, I mean, if you've not seen Kane's Arcade, go look it up right now, because it's just completely brilliant. Essentially, this kiddo, a 9-year-old Kane, is at his dad's shop every day. His dad owns an auto parts store, and he, spends his summers like I spent my summers at your parents' place of work. And so he finds ways to entertain himself, and he builds this entire cardboard arcade and has tickets and the whole thing. And one day his dad gets a customer who, sees what he's doing and says, "Oh yeah, he's got this arcade." And he's like, "Cool. How many fun passes has he sold?" And he's like, "Well, it's kind of a joke. You're his only customer. You're the only one who's ever interacted with him." And the customer happened to be a film producer. And so he came back and shot this like mini documentary about Kane's Arcade, and then put it on social media about this arcade. And basically it became a flash mob where everybody showed up one day to play all these games, and just super inspiring, fun. But I think about how much that video really impacted the way that we did projects at Anastasis. We used cardboard all the time for everything. And the second year of Anastasis, I think that global day of play associated with Kane's Arcade came to be. And so we participated in the day of play for years, where we would just, come together and build things out of cardboard. But how important that became in kind of shaping just how we think about building, and, again, breaking free of the trifold, stupid trifold. Like, we can be more creative than this. But I really think that Kane's Arcade was one of those moments that happened at the right time, and kind of helped shape a lot of how we do things and just our way of being at Anastasis.
The first time we ever did Global Day of Play, and we were like, we're just going to create arcade games. So we'd shown the kids a video, and then each class got to kind of think through what they wanted to build. And actually, there were multiple items built in each class. Do you remember that the kids in the oldest class built a mechanical bull?
I do remember this.
I mean,
I remember it well. I also remember the Dance Dance Revolution where they'd put out the colored paper and somebody would flash it behind and they would.
It was so fun.
Cool.
Again, they had to have some constraints on what to create, but some of the kids made replicas of things that they saw in the video, which was great.
Absolutely.
That was one step of, okay, you figured out what you want to build. Let's make a little pinball machine out of cardboard. And they did great.
How's that going to work? Yeah.
All the way up to a mechanical bull. And the mechanical bull didn't work perfectly the whole time, but they still made it work. I was just in awe.
It worked pretty well. I know. It was so fun. And every year was
something different.
Year was different, and
one
every
year
was brilliant and fun.
Mini golf. Each class did a mini golf, like a little putt hole. And they got to shape it however they wanted to. Some years it was Rube Goldberg, and
Rube Goldberg machine year was cool
and difficult.
Yes,
we did that twice. Difficult. We did it one where it was all cardboard, and then one when it was cardboard plus other.
It was
things.
A mashup. Yeah.
But what did the kids learn from? We talked about simple machines. We learned about how to use cardboard and create notches and flanges and ways to make cardboard work as a tool. One year we made the photo booths.
Yeah, the photo booths turned out
so cool,
phenomenally. I'll put some of those pictures associated with
so much fun. And the kids had a blast. Sometimes it was like, as a teacher, again, I felt sometimes like, okay, I'm putting too much stress on it, having to get it done and make it look the right way. And that was on me as the adult stopping to think.
It is the hardest part for Identity Day, for storyline, for Day of Play. The hardest part was stepping back and not getting too overly involved as the grown-up.
Yeah. There were some things that the kids, we knew that they wouldn't be able to do if they were really little, like helping them to like actually cut the cardboard. We gave them those little plastic cardboard cutters, and sometimes they did work through the harder
screws.
Yeah. And they'd either figure it out, or sometimes we were just spending a little extra time cutting through that for them. But they had the ideas and the plans, and it also was fun to watch them make a plan that, like, I knew
didn't work.
Yeah, and I knew wasn't going to work, and having to step back and let them figure out this isn't going to go the way you think it is. Didn't say that. And there were some frustrations. Sometimes there was tears, but like, okay, we know this isn't going to work anymore. We're not going to keep trying. What else could we do instead?
We try?
And helping them learn to take a step back, look at it objectively, and go, not so much.
Some of those Day of Play we implemented. We knew there was learning. Right. Anytime we're doing something, we knew there was learning involved. I don't think that I think we were looking for, like, this is a fun whole community event, because it would be whole school doing it for a day. I don't think we realized, at least I don't think I did until reflecting back, how much that impacted how kids saw themselves as learners, how much it created an environment of self-advocacy and empowerment and permissive learning. These moments that seemed, in past schools would have been seen as like a wasted day, ended up being so monumentally important to how every other thing we do all year long. There was nothing wasted. It was so important.
I think that for us as a staff, that was important to know. It was important to help educate our parents about that as well. I think sometimes certain parents who are very, very academically driven themselves were like, okay, but you're giving up learning for that day. And I'm like, no, let's take a step back and
see. This is the learning. Yeah.
Here, they did measuring. They learned about project management.
They made plans.
Right.
They collaborated. They negotiated. Yeah.
Sometimes they were doing research for those things. Sometimes they were writing out narratives. There was so much integrated learning across lots of different content areas that helping parents to see that was also a big part of our job in many ways. when we did any of these things in the Identity Day storyline, any of those, because it doesn't look like regular school. And so it looks like it looked a lot of times like we were giving up something important, and I say that with air quotes,
yes,
to do something fun. I'm like, no, you don't. Here's what they're doing.
In the play, there was so much happening. There were so many of what we would term soft skills, the problem solving, the critical thinking, the creativity. When I think about how kids were able to engage inquiry or anything else we were doing, I think if we did not have those moments, what happened in inquiry would not have been as rich.
No.
I think if we had not had those moments, the way that kids interacted with adults would have looked so vastly different. I think there was so much to the community aspect of that. There was so much to coming together and doing something fun and playful. But you're right, there was such rich learning there, but it didn't look like what we expect learning to look like in school.
I think that goes back to just the nature of play itself and how important that, and again, we have study after study and all of this research into how incredibly important play is for kids in learning, and how play-based kindergarten and preschool is vital to the success of a student later on. And I use the word success very loosely.
It activates the seeking system, which is what makes learning happen. There's so many important pieces to that. And I do think we did it just purely as a fun community day, and we loved Kane's Arcade. And then it was in retrospect that we're like, oh, this is we stumbled on something here that is vitally important that then we fought to do every year.
Absolutely.
Fought is the wrong word because I was in charge and we were just doing what we wanted. But we really were intentional is a better word in doing that after we saw the magic.
The interpersonal and intrapersonal skills that the kids received from and were able to improve as we went along from those days were invaluable. And I can't imagine doing school without those.
I can't either. When I think about the most essential pieces of Anastasis, it's all those days that in a district might be considered wasted. And I'm like, or all those moments, even, community time every morning takes time.
Right.
The walk every morning takes a chunk of time. The morning meeting in the classroom takes time, where it doesn't look like school learning. And I think it could be considered wasted, but I think what we discovered is those are the most essential parts of what we do, and the relationships that we built and the way that we empowered kids as learners and in their learning. Because those days also taught them, I am a learner. I know how to learn. I know how to advocate. I know how to push in. I know, all these additional things came about in the way that they saw themselves.
Right. I know
I think are so important.
my strengths. I know that maybe your strength isn't the same as mine. I think back to, again, the traditional model of schooling. Whenever there's a group project, a lot of kids, right? A lot of kids
hated them.
And a lot of parents, I remember as a teacher in a traditional model school, hearing parents say, I don't think group projects are fair because my kid's going to be graded on that kid and that's a lazy kid. And I literally had a parent say that to me when I was teaching. And I was like, oh gosh. And every once in a while you'd hear somebody speak up and say, well, I have group projects at work all the time. And if somebody isn't pulling their weight, I have to step up, and that's just part of life. But when you put grades in there, that's when the mentality changes, right? So,
I do think it's important to note we didn't grade any of these things.
We don't.
There was no score. There was no grade. There was no external carrot at all.
Right. It was really the whole school.
The whole school was like that. But I'm imagining somebody translating this into a more traditional system. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Grades would have, a score at the end of storyline would have made it not even worth doing.
Right. Day of play. If our Rube Goldberg machine worked once, but not 10 times, right? how do you grade that? Well, what I really looked at was each kid took on a different piece, and then they had to figure out how their pieces fit together.
Connected.
And again, we'd learned just so much about the simple machines, but they had to figure out how to put it together. And there were some kids who take leadership more naturally than others, but then there are some who definitely don't like being told what to do by a peer, and helping them to see that we're not like, well, so-and-so is bossing me around. No, you're figuring out how to work together, and how important those things were in the grand scheme of things. You can't grade that. And that was as important, if not more so, than what they actually created and what they learned about simple machines.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm thinking too of Day of Play, the cleanup of that day, as important as everything else we did. The amount of cardboard, you guys, if you had seen the disaster, the cleanup almost every year made us go, is this worth doing?
Right.
Because it was so monumental. But even in the cleanup and how they were negotiating, who was doing what. And I'm remembering like kids surfing down the stairs on cardboard at the end of the day to head to the dumpster. All of that was so important, down to the cleanup.
And even the conversations about what gets recycled, which was almost all of it. And the fact that one year it was like,
what pieces can we reuse that we took out of the prototype lab?
What are we going to put back into that? What can still be used again, and making sure, how are we going to do Day of Play without creating a bunch of waste? Because that's not who we were. And that was a great conversation too, because that changed the mentality of how many glue sticks am I going to use today compared to what else could I use instead of 20 glue sticks?
Right. Back to your point of like learning about a cardboard flange and like, how do we make it fit together and notch together without using tape and glue and whatever else? Yeah. So much that is there's no place to put that on a report card.
No. Maybe in the comments, but
my goodness, it shaped so much of who the kids that left us are. Those moments of just,
I always love to hear the alums talk about any of those days. And we have a lot of kids who come back to visit us, or they message us through different social media apps. And my favorite day was Identity Day, when we got to learn more about, who we were, and just whatever they might bring up or what they remember is always just a great time. Like, teachers always love to hear from former students and what you remembered from their classrooms or about them individually, right? And our kids come back with so many different, like, they'll tell us, we were a family, or I really, feel like I'm at home here. But then they can also remember very specific things that I'm like, wow, you remember that? I'm surprised.
Yeah. I think, again, so much of that has to do with when you feel valued and you're valuable. And it's, and that is evident in everything, every structure. We were really, really intentional about how do we ensure that kids know that they belong, know that they're worthy, feel like they have a place. And we were careful in every decision we were making to look at, does this decision support that?
Right.
Or is the unintended consequence of this decision telling kids the opposite of what our words are saying?
Right.
And I think about how many practices in school, we say we want growth mindset, but then every system that we put in place tells kids the exact opposite. We tell kids it's okay to fail, but then we give them a grade.
Right.
We tell kids, like, there's so many just moments, touch points in a school setting that our words don't matter as much as how are the decisions that we are making and the systems we're putting into place showing that is true.
Conversations that we could have with our students compared to what I was able to have in previous schools. Yes, I know that you want to keep learning about that right now, but we don't have time because we have to move on to the next unit or something like that. That's not how we do business here. And that conversation is a lot different when you can say, here's how we do business and here's how we care about each other. That conversation is changed from you're responsible for who you are and nobody else.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the case at Anastasis. We're responsible for each other.
It built a lot of trust, I think, that our words matched the actions that were happening. The hidden, somebody calls it a hidden curriculum. I can't think of who that is. But it's the hidden curriculum that's in every school, right? Is the just how we do things here. I think our hidden curriculum indicated to kids that they were trusted, that we care about them, that they're valued, that they're known, that they're loved, that they belong. But again, we were super intentional about those pieces in the ways that we were talking, in the ways that we were approaching things. If you had a kid on day of play say, what if we did, which often happened almost every time, I have a great idea for next year's day of play. And you know what? That's what we did the next year. It was like their voice was so honored. And I think they knew that that was true. Even if they weren't always getting their way, they knew that we were going to listen to them, that we were going to value what they were saying, that we were going to indulge, the wild ideas or the crazy ideas or the could we try, and that it wouldn't be shut down. They knew that they had the ability to come to us with ideas. And they, again, that self-advocacy piece, we say we want kids to be self-advocates, but a lot of the systems we put in place tell them the opposite.
Right. I want to learn about this system, body system, and that's what we're kind of researching right now. Great. But if that's in a traditional model and it's not in the textbook, do they have the freedom to do that? Yes or no? Some places, probably yes. That's a teacher who's flexible. In other places where the teachers aren't not allowed to be flexible, probably not. And that doesn't really, I keep thinking back to, conversations I've had with older students who've gone through a traditional model their entire lives, and they have the mindset of, well, how will my little brother learn about vectors if all he's ever interested in is baseball? And my brain goes, well, you can use baseball to teach a lot of things, including vectors. Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you take something he's already passionate about? And her response was, well, but that's not in the curriculum. I thought, oh, that's sad. If I know
That's so sad.
If I know he's excited about baseball, I'm going to use every opportunity I can to help him think about learning in a different way that might connect into something he's interested in.
We got really lucky with the folks who were surrounding us in Anastasis, our staff, our peers. We had so many willing to be outside of the box thinkers, to be agile, to be permissive in learning, to challenge each other's ideas and be playful with each other. I don't take that for granted. I do think there was some magic created just by who was in the room, but we are also valuing each other's voice. We were also valuing that we were seeing the world differently. And rather than that being like, well, they're wrong. Right. My way of thinking is the right way. They are wrong. It was almost improvisation in the way that we would approach things and like riff on each other's ideas and like playfully engage, or I don't know. I think the kids also saw us do it, which made it easier for them to engage those same things.
I think so too. And there was one year when one of our staff members spoke up in a staff meeting and said, you guys have it all together, but I just suck. And we kind of took a step back and went, what do you mean? And he said, nothing I'm doing right now is working and I feel like a failure. And I remember thinking, oh, we haven't shared enough of this one didn't go great. So here's what we did.
Of how it's at.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's what we did
moments
instead.
We've had over the years.
And you touched on a huge point about improvisation. And I said pivot earlier. We always joke about the Friends scene
pivot!
With Ross on the couch, but we use that word quite liberally because we needed to.
We do. And still,
right?
We're in the middle of a pivot.
We're in a huge pivot.
Now.
That's a skill that is undervalued sometimes, I think, in teaching, because you have a plan. You go forward with the plan. Well, what happens when the plans aren't working? So I remember that day we were like, oh gosh, we're sorry. We should be sharing some of the times when things don't go well. And then
it went spectacularly wrong.
And how do you react to it? And how do you help the kids see that, oh yeah, that's not going to work. Let's try something else. Just that mindset alone was helpful. And then he was like, oh, so it's not just me.
No. And you know what? I think it's hard too, because we were so improvisational in the way that we did things. Even in those moments we were failing, it didn't feel final.
Right.
And so that's why I think we didn't always think to share those stories, because it was like, yeah, we're just continuing to iterate on,
It's just what we do.
It's just what we do. And that core group of us that started together and then kept on, we saw that happen. And so you don't remember to tell the stories when it's a shared story.
Right.
And so you're right. When as new staff members came in, it became really important for us to share, like, oh no, when we started this, it started looking completely different than how it looks today. And it's going to look different later because the world's going to be different. We're going to be different. Kids are going to be different, right? It'll evolve with all of us.
Or even this activity I planned for this week that I thought was going to be awesome was a complete flop. And
it was a complete
and I had
disaster.
To go, oh gosh, I need to try something different. But
right. And owning those moments with kids too, I think was really important for us to be like, yeah, I thought this was going to go one way. It's going another. Like, should we scrap this? And them seeing us do that in real time, I think was probably helpful as well. But yeah, it was hard to remember because I think when failure feels final and the end, those are the moments you share as like, oh my gosh, we had the biggest fail ever. The way that we were failing was very much a fail forward iterative process. And so it didn't always come across the same or land the same.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. So it looks like we're almost done with this episode. What should we talk about next time?
Oh, what should we talk about next time? I wonder if we should go through a year, like remember year 2, starting with like detox and then moving through the inquiry and how that process was being built.
I think that's a great idea. And just even talking about how each inquiry block wasn't an end, but could, the way that the learning standards and the inquiry ideas and concepts were kind of scaffolded across each year. Each inquiry block just kind of fed into so they blended into each other, and we didn't feel like the learning had to stop and start a new thing. I think that'd be a great thing to talk about too.
This was a fun one because those are my favorite days.
They were great days.
They're really good days. They were hard days too.
Yeah.
Because it was a lot of stimulus for me, let's be honest. But I loved those days. I loved seeing the kids in new lights. I loved just the way it connected us and built relationship and community and set the stage for so much of what else we did. So I like that one.
Great memories.
I know. We'll maybe have to sprinkle those in throughout.
For sure.
Because they were just so fun. But okay. Well,
onward.
Hey, Michelle, where else can people find you online?
I blog at avenue4learning.com, and the 4 is the actual number 4, not the word 4, avenue4learning.com.
And you can find me at dreamsofeducation.wordpress.com, which is my original blog. You can also find me at ktsplace.com, which is where I share a bunch of resources and kind of projects that we're currently working on. And we are both on Blue Sky at the moment, but not as active as we once were on our favorite bird. Come find us and connect with us in other places, and we look forward to connecting with you.